Jack Barsky. Welcome to the podcast.
Okay, I'm glad to be here, I think.
You think?
Let's start talking and then I will confirm or deny. I most likely will not deny, but we already had a nice talk, so I think we're gonna do well.
Let's roll right into it then. So you're you wrote a book. You are a former KGB, and your life is just complex. It plays out just like a movie.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I don't even know where to begin because your life really starts when you turn 30. But take me from the beginning. Take me from where your life actually begins, because you
What my
base
life when I came into existence,
so
that's when my life began. Or you're talking about my adult life.
your adult life. And this is what I mean by your life being really complex. So you're 30, and then you're recruited to join the KGB, right?
Yeah, you got the age a little bit wrong. I was 24 or
Okay.
23, I forgot, when I was first approached by the KGB. I was a chemistry student at university, and I was in my junior year when KGB first got in touch with me. That was not recruitment. That was befriending me and trying to figure out whether I was the right person to for that I was the right material to be recruited, because they were, and this I learned only much later, when a number of high-level KGB officials gave interviews after the Soviet Union fell apart, and they shared a little bit how the recruitment went particularly for illegals that operate undercover in a foreign country. They were looking for particular individuals with a lot of uh, pre-designed character traits, not skills. We're not talking about skills. Skills you acquire. Character traits you're mostly born with. Like, they were looking for smart people that make decisions really quick, that have no problem with loneliness, that are not fearful, that have no problem moving from here to there when most people do. Moving around in the world and changing who you are and all this stuff. So the first encounter was very friendly. Well, let's hang out together for a while. 18 months, and the fellow that was working with me, he introduced himself as Herman. Um, uh, he also gave me some tasks to see if I can do things that make most people uncomfortable,
Mhm.
such as he told me one time uh, to reach out to a family and find out some details about the relatives that family had in the West, who was possibly of interest for recruitment, and I was supposed to find out if and when he would come to visit. So how do you do that? I got an address and a name. So I came up with a cover story with an excuse to ring the bell. I told her, the lady who answered the door, I told her that I'm a civics student. No, this is there's another word for that. It's it's sort of close to psychology. Anyway,
Mhm.
sometimes I have a blockage in my brain. That I call this deferred retrieval. Um, so anyway, I told her that I'm doing a survey as part of my studies, and I had a bunch of questions written down, and we talked about some general stuff. What their life is like, and what they like doing, what they don't like doing, and then I gradually moved the conversation to a topic where she sort of volunteered, right? For instance, I shared something of myself. I said, you know what? I wish I had some relatives in the West because, I have neighbors and they get all these packages with all the good stuff, and then I never get any of that. So this was already small talk,
Mhm.
and she said, "Well, we get the packages too. Oh man, you're so lucky." And on it went, and eventually I knew that this fellow would come to visit, and when he would come to visit. So that was a task that made me extremely uncomfortable, because I had to, I was in those days I was shy when it came to interacting with strangers. I wasn't shy when I was in the company of people who I knew, but strangers I was like, oh, and so and then we talked a lot about what it might be like to be a spy and how life would be, but it was non-committal at the time, uh, until about 18 months into this relationship, he sent me to Berlin for some more training. Well, he didn't tell me that he sent me to be recruited because they had made the decision based on my interaction with him that I was the right guy. They wanted me, but I didn't know that. So in Berlin, I met another KGB agent who was my liaison there, and who gave me some more training. But the last day, the next to last day of my existence in Berlin, he took me to headquarters. It was the Soviet Army headquarters, KGB headquarters, and that is where I was introduced to a very high level official, and I'm guessing he was probably the head of the KGB in East Germany. Um, he was treated by two other people in the room with a lot of deference. How Russians show deference to somebody, particularly a male. They use the patronym. They don't just say Sergei Voronkov. They say Sergei Alexeyevich Voronkov,
Mhm.
and then they would say again Sergei Alexeyevich. So, and he started doing small talk, and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And then and I think this may well have been on purpose. He switched radically, and he asked, "So can we count on you? Are you in?" I had never, up to that point, I had never really considered that this would be reality. I was just playing around. I just wanted to like figure out, there were some benefits. The Herman gave me Western uh, magazines to read. That was normally forbidden. You were not allowed to have that kind of stuff. And um, and he also encouraged me to listen to Western radio. That was also forbidden. It was part of like sort of training. Uh, anyway, so I had never really thought about the reality of this. And here he's asking me that question. So I stalled. I said, um, I, I can't answer that because I don't know if I'm qualified and I really don't have a lot of training. And he said, in a very strong voice, not hostile, but very like a steely kind of
Mhm.
voice, he said, "Don't you worry about that. We know that you're qualified and we will train you, but we only work with people who can make important decisions rather quickly. So you got until tomorrow noon
Wow.
to say yes or no."
So up until this point, up un, up until this point, they formed a friendship with you to test you whether you
Yes.
were qualified enough to join.
Yeah.
And okay,
And again, first of all, you could not, in those days, you could not apply for the Stasi, East German Secret Police. I couldn't have applied for the KGB. They had no address. Like in the U.S., you can apply to be hired by the CIA,
mhm,
and they'll always find something to do. They were looking for very, very special talents. Okay, and those talents, based on what these people that I told you about in the interview said, they comb through thousands of people to find the right person. The character profile, the profile of traits is rare to have all that it takes. Think about. Put yourself in the shoes of that I was in when I was launched from Moscow. So I had a birth certificate, an authentic birth certificate that said Jack Barsky, born in New Jersey. And then I got on a plane and I flew to Belgrade, and from Belgrade I took a train to Vienna. From Vienna I took another train to Rome. From Rome I took a plane to Mexico, Mexico City. Eventually, no, to first Spain and then Mexico, and Mexico
Hmm.
City to Chicago and then to New York.
Wow.
And and so the moment I set foot on the territory of the United States, I was Jack Barsky. In those days, you can operate on. You didn't need documentation.
Hmm.
And then I acquired my documentation and driver's license, social security card, and I gradually integrated in society. It took 6, 7 years for me
Yeah.
to be comfortable as an American. All of that is daunting, isn't it? I went the first trip alone. I went through several cities where I didn't speak the language,
Hmm.
and I had to meet people there to exchange passports. I had to buy plane tickets and train tickets and all of this, and then you spend uh, 2 years, almost 2 years, all by yourself in New York City because it took me a year and a half to get the documents where I could actually have a conversation with somebody. So supposedly they asked me, "So where are you from? Where were you born?" And I had to have the proof that I wasn't lying, and I had to have the social security card, and to a degree the driver's license to get my first job, and all of this by yourself in a strange land.
So
And
how old were you at this point?
I was 28
Okay, 28.
when I came to the U.S.
Okay, and that's why I thought that you were 30. So it was like right before 2 years before you
Yeah,
turned
it was
30.
close enough.
Yeah, so I'm
It was
30
close.
right now. So
Oh,
and that's what I was referring to. So you lived your entire life in Germany, right? And when you're 28, you are transferred to a country that you don't know anyone in, and you're left to fend for yourself. Your
yep,
your entire
yep.
life gets upended in a country where you don't know anyone.
That's right. And listen, my first job it was an interesting promotion. I was already an assistant professor when I said yes to the KGB. I was on my way to have a great career in academia. My first job in New York City was bike messenger.
Well, and
That requires a level of fearlessness too. To in those days there were no bike lanes. In those days you had to be mingling with the buses and the cars and the motorcycles. That's a dangerous damn job.
I bet. so so you're 28. Up until you're 28, you were in Germany, and your name was Albrecht, right?
Yeah, well, no American can pronounce this right. It's Albrecht.
Albrecht.
Imagine, yeah, imagine, yeah, you have a like a bug um, and some kind of a fly at the of your mouth, and you know that, and you want it out, and make a hissing sound. Albrecht.
So
Anyway, it's okay.
up until then, you were in Germany. You come to the US and begin a new life as Jack.
Yeah,
So by new life, entirely new. So you came up with a story, or was this given to you like the high school that you went to, where
yeah.
where you grew up?
This is called the backstory. You know, how what did I do? Where did until the moment I showed up in New York City, and there were a number of KGB agents, maybe a number, maybe only one, but at least one who gathered a lot of information. So, for instance, he found I was born in Orange, New Jersey, but my family moved to New York City. They gave me an address where they lived. Then we killed my father. So and that was very convenient because my mother's maiden name, Jack Barsky's mother's maiden name is Schwartz,
Mm.
and that was really good because I knew that I have a residual accent. I still speak with a bit of an accent. So, but when people ask me, you sound a little European, and I said, yeah, I know. I grew up bilingual. My mother is German.
Mm.
Okay, so and so we had my father die, and I went. They gave me also the name of a high school that I attended, and I dropped out of high school because of headaches.
Mm.
So I don't have a high school diploma, right? So that's why I had to drop out. Barsky didn't have a high school diploma. The real Jack Barsky died at the age of 11. He never went to high school. And so they had me work at a company, at a chemical factory called George Luder's and Company. At the time, at the time they found out about this company, it had exploded. So it didn't exist anymore. So that was pretty clever. And then they had me work on a farm. So because of the headaches, I had to get out of the city. And I had migraine headaches, and I worked on a farm in upstate New York. I forgot the name of the farmer. It was a pretty big farm. That was also convenient because they knew some things very well. They knew that farm workers and employees of religious organizations, churches, and so forth, at the time were exempt from the Social Security law. So you could actually, at the age of when I was 30, yeah, roughly 30, uh, you could apply for a Social Security number at that age, and it was okay.
Mm.
They in the interview they asked me, "What? How come I don't have one?" I said, "I don't know. Nobody ever asked me." So, what kind of a job did you have? Oh, I worked with this farmer over there. And oh, okay. So yeah, so I was clearly when I came here, I was a work in progress, and with a very high risk associated with that.
So this was a part of your backstory. So you never actually worked in a chemical lab. You never actually worked in the farm, right?
That's right.
But you did work. Was it delivering newspapers on a bike?
Yeah. Well, no. This I worked for a messenger company in those days, and I don't know if they still do that. Uh, yeah. Say if you're in a big city and you are a publisher and you want to send a book or a bunch of books to somebody and you want to send them right away in the city, you call a messenger service and you give it to somebody who walks and takes public transportation and then delivers it. Those people got minimum wage.
Mm.
In my day, messenger companies there were a lot of them because also checks were transported by a messenger. In those days, electronic transfer wasn't that widespread, and contracts were going back and forth, and all this was all done by messengers. And the fastest messenger in the city of New York were bike messengers.
Yeah,
We were faster than the cars because the traffic is like horrendously slow.
it's crazy.
Have you ever been in Manhattan?
I haven't. No.
Okay, so or in California, in LA for that matter.
It gets crazy. I mean, I live in Vegas. The traffic here is
Oh,
crazy. So I know.
oh yeah, you do know. So uh, that's what I did. I delivered checks, I delivered contracts, I delivered bigger packages, and that was a really good living because very few people wanted to do that job. It was too dangerous. I had one accident where I dislocated my right shoulder, and thank God it is slightly, not as mobile as this shoulder, but other
Yeah.
than that, there's no pain in it. But I escaped one near-death accident. I don't want to get too much into detail, but it was near death. I hit a pothole in the middle of the road, and I had to the right of me, I had a bus who was in the bus lane, and to the left of me was a big truck. If I don't manage to go straight down, I'm dead.
Hmm.
Okay, I got lucky, but I also maneuvered the bike. When I saw the thing, I lifted the front wheel up so it wouldn't hit the pothole. If that hits the pothole, I'm dead. So yeah, and I made enough money to be able to live on my own. That really impressed the KGB because they didn't expect me. They expected me to need an influx of cash by them, and I said I don't need any more. I can rent an apartment. I can live a normal life because I'm making good money. Wow, that was impressive.
So the KGB wasn't actually paying you in any form?
No, they were paying me. They paid me a regular salary in dollars. I think it was $500 a month,
Mm.
which I didn't need. They also subsidized some of my living expenses, any kind of doctor's bill. That applied to all the agents who
Mhm.
were abroad. They also um, um, gave me half of the expenses that were associated with vehicle maintenance.
Mm.
When I had a vehicle, they actually paid me half of what it cost to buy that vehicle, and some other expenses. And all that money they kept in Moscow in dollars, and it was adding up over the years. I think I don't remember the entire amount, but it was easily 50, $60,000 in savings, and in those days, that was the equivalent of close to $1 million that
Wow.
was saved on my behalf in Moscow, uh, which would have made me a rich person if and when I was going to return back to Germany.
So you
Didn't happen.
never collected that money.
I never collected that. My German wife got some of it. Okay, I know this for a fact because I have a relationship with our son, and he told me that they got some money, but it wasn't the entire amount. So somebody, in the even today in the espionage world, cash is king.
Hmm.
Can't trace it. Okay, so and you give cash to a courier, if the recipient doesn't know how much they're going to get, the courier can take some.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she received some. She did not receive the full amount. Was she
She
supposed?
she received she received a lot by East German standards. I
Oh,
mean, if
okay.
you had even only $10,000 in those days, I mean, you were considered rich.
Wow. So, and we're going to get to that later because you remained in the U.S. Uh, and your mom died without knowing that you were alive because they told your wife that you were dead.
Yeah,
Everyone
yeah,
thought that you
that's
were
correct.
dead,
Because I told him I was going to die.
and yeah, and so your mom died without ever knowing anything about you, and
Yeah,
still
she
searching for
she
you.
she died at a time when I was still undercover. I had quit the KGB, but I had not reported to the FBI. I had not really defected. I had just resigned, and I was just going to live out my life in the shadows
Hmm.
because I was afraid to say hello to the FBI. I was afraid to be arrested, and I had a family here, and I was afraid that would damage the family significantly.
Yeah.
So, uh, my mom, I forgot exactly when she passed away, but it was maybe like 3 to 4 years before I got my citizenship and I was able to go back to Germany and visit people.
Wow.
Um, and I couldn't reach out to her when I had quit the KGB. It would have been okay for Germany,
Hmm.
but if I reach out and somehow somebody gets wind of that in the U.S., you know, I'll get arrested, right? I wouldn't want to tip my hand. So yeah, she she passed away not knowing what happened to me because just let me just finish this thought here. My cover story that I told her was that since I had a degree in chemistry, I was recruited to work in space research in Kazakhstan, super secret installation where you couldn't get anywhere near that place, and there were no phone lines to the outside. It was like the Alamo, but much more in secret. Okay, if the KGB and the Russians were really good at one thing, and that's keep secrets,
Mm-hmm.
Americans are not very good at that. We are a country of blabbers,
Oh yeah.
dude, leakers. There's always somebody who will leak.
Mm-hmm. So your mom never actually knew that you were in the U.S.
No, not at all.
Wow. So coming back to the U.S., so you were working as a mail courier, riding a bicycle around Manhattan, but you studied you studied in chemistry. You studied chemistry.
I studied chemistry in Germany. I have a master's degree, and I don't remember anything that I learned.
But did you ever feel that your skills were not being utilized if you studied all of this chemistry? And I'm sure you were passionate about it. Um,
No, 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 no. I would have made a good professor. I liked teaching, but I didn't have a passion for chemistry.
mm,
It was just a good career. And regardless, even if I did, when I signed up with the KGB, I knew that, and I knew that I was going to become an illegal and start fresh. I knew that chemistry was useless. You can't take
mm,
your resume with you. You can't. I couldn't even take my high school diploma with me. I had to start from scratch. I had to get an equivalency diploma, and then I had to go to college again in the U.S. so I could become a professional, which I did.
mm. So you basically had to do it all over again while in the U.S.
Yeah, reinvent myself. Another language, another name, another career, and I did pretty well. I wound up in the eventually in the corporate executive suite.
Oh wow. Um,
Yeah.
so when you're delivering packages and stuff, so how good have you had it integrated into the U.S. Like into U.S. society?
At that time, not at all. I got lucky. This was not by design. I got lucky that I picked the messenger job because the only people I had no social interaction in the first 3 years, none. Um, because that would have been too dangerous. People would have figured out that I'm not real.
Hmm.
But when I picked the messenger job, I spent a lot of time in an office waiting for my next delivery.
Hmm.
And I was able to observe the other messengers interact with one another, where they would talk about the sports teams, they would talk about TV programs, they would talk about their favorite food, and all this cultural stuff that nobody ever taught me in Moscow. And these people were safe. I had my ears open. And the reason that they were safe, they weren't interested in other people. And they were mostly like itinerant workers. They were temporary. They did this for a while and then they went on to something else. This is not a career
Hmm.
messenger. Even bike messenger is becomes at one point it gets too tired, and if once you have a couple of accidents, you're going to find yourself something else. So I learned rather than there's this legend that outside of Moscow they had this village that was built like in the United States, and this is how you learn how to be an American. That did not
Hmm.
exist. If it had existed, I would have been trained there. So my village was the messenger office, and then there was a secondary village. That's when I went to college, and New York City is has so many different types of people with different races, different nationalities. And City University, where I studied, was like the United Nations. So it was okay for me to learn to meet some more Americans, but amongst other people that were slightly unusual. When I left City University and had my first job, I started feeling comfortable as an American. And that was about 6.5 years after I came to the US. And I was smart enough to know that it took for me to take that much time to be safe and not be suspected of being phony or a liar or having a shady past. I I I passed, uh, even though some people, there were a couple of people who asked me. So again, the question about, man, you sound European. So are you Dutch or like Danish? I said, it's about I got a little accent because I grew up bilingual. And in New York, that ends the conversation.
Hmm.
There's so many accents in New York. There are Puerto Ricans that were born in New York City that have a much stronger accent than I ever had. So, yep. So that's my answer to how long it took me. And now not today, as I'm talking to you, I feel much more like an American with some German roots than a German. I wouldn't want to go live as a German in Germany. You would have to bribe me with a lot of money to do that.
Because you, at this point or now, you've lived longer in the US than you ever did
Correct.
in Germany.
That is exactly correct. And I have also matured in this country because when I left Germany, I wasn't really mature.
Mhm.
Your maturation, in my case, took longer than with a lot of people. I was just playing around. I tell people I played life. I didn't take it seriously, and everything I touched came easily to me. I was successful in everything I wanted to do. I had a straight A average in college in a program that was extremely difficult. There were situations when a written exam for 60 people, and these were all hand selected smart people. I was the only one with an A, and the second best grade was a C.
Wow.
So I didn't care what's going to happen. I was just like I knew I was going to do well, and I was going to be a tenured professor making a lot of money, and finding a nice woman, get married, and all that. And when I came to the U.S., I had to start at ground zero, get
Mhm.
a get a high school diploma, and which for most people to start like that over again is humiliating. To me, it was a task, and so I couldn't help that. Like eventually, growing and growing and growing, and it took me a long time. I think about 2 years ago was the first time that I figured that my growth period is not complete, but is mostly finished, and I'm in my
Mhm.
70s.
Wow. So, how was it hard to form friendships when you came to the US, or how long did it take you to actually form some friendships?
Well, while I was in college, I befriended some of the younger students. Yeah, that wasn't hard at all. I tutored some people. There's a set of triplets that attended identical triplets that attended my college, and I tutored each one of them, and I made some friends, but I couldn't get too close.
Hmm.
I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough real history in the United States yet. So, you couldn't be too intimate when, let's say, they wanted to ask questions what it was like to be on a farm, right? I had never been on a farm, an American farm.
Yeah.
So I had to wait until, and this was just like when I had my first job. This was 6 years, 7 years into my time in the US. Uh, then at that time, I had enough history where I could talk about, oh, that, you know, uh, Happy Days, the TV program.
Mhm.
I had watched many episodes already. I knew the sports teams. And I could direct the conversation to something I knew. In the beginning, I knew nothing.
Wow.
Okay. So real friendships took me about About 8 years. And the last 2 years, I had a couple of good male friends, and I had the good sense to have girlfriends that weren't born in the United States, and I married one of them. So they couldn't figure this out. You know, they were immigrants from another country, English speaking, but I I couldn't have gotten intimate with an American born, no matter the race, because they would have figured out something is wrong with the guy. Women are more intuitive than men, that's for sure.
And one other thing, so you're in the US. This is before you actually form intimate relationships, before you really form any real friendships. How were you able to manage the day to day life without anyone around you? No family, really no one.
Well, I did watch a lot of television, and that was part of my task. I had to, right? Uh, I also did a couple of things that kept me busy when television started to get a little boring. I taught myself to touch type,
Hmm.
which I didn't know why I did that, just because I figured there would be something to do. So, and I copied a book that contained biographies of famous composers. I also I'm a very musical guy. I play the guitar a little bit, but my musical skills are in here in the ears. And so I went through the entire repertoire of classical music. So when I got home, I played classical music, and then I read a book or something like that. I read books, and I also taught myself Spanish. I bought a course. In those days, it was just a book. Okay,
Hmm.
I, the, I forgot. Did I have tapes? I'm not sure, but I became passively fluent in Spanish, so I could read uh, Spanish original novels. So I always kept myself busy, and there was always there, my communication with Moscow took quite a bit of time. I would say at least 2, 3 days out of each month in terms of when you add up all the time. And I had to also be very familiar with the city because your city is your playground. And I constantly was looking for places where you can make a signal that another one can read, or where you can uh, put a container in a dead drop operation. You know what a dead drop is?
I've heard of that term.
Okay, let me explain this to your audience.
Okay.
Um, and obviously, when you engage in espionage, you exchange stuff. You
Right.
exchange information. Nowadays, information exchange is easier because you can do it electronically, and you can. But if you want to give somebody money and it's untraceable, how do you give that person money? You just don't meet them.
Hmm.
That's too dangerous. So you put that money and you put it in some kind of a container. Uh, the Soviets used oil cans, crushed oil cans, and you put it in a place at a certain time that both of you, me who gets it and he who puts the container there, know. And then at that time when I'm supposed to pick that up, I go and take it. That's a dead drop operation, still in use these days
Hmm.
for certain things like passports and money, simply because, particularly in my case, almost all the KGB agents in the US were diplomats. And then there were us illegals, a few of us. And so the diplomats were suspected to be agents, and most of them were, and a lot of them were followed. So if they come and meet me and give me what they're supposed to give me in person, I'm going to get investigated, and then I'm busted. And we couldn't afford that.
So these messages were being transmitted to you and giving you the locations of where the dead drops were.
Messages were transmitted to me via shortwave radio,
And
Morse code.
and then you had to
And that
decipher the messages.
I had to what?
decipher the messages. So it was all basically code, and then you would just have to write it
Yes, it
down.
wasn't coded. I had to decipher, and that typically took quite some time. I had to do this most of the time manually. And the other thing is, for me to send information, I used secret writing on paper that was then sent via airmail. And when I made these secret writings and prepared the letter and did everything that I needed to do, and I had to encrypt some of the information I sent over, uh, that took at least a half day on a Saturday because I couldn't do it while I was working.
Hmm.
I couldn't do it. It took too much time
Yeah.
because first you you write what's called the open text, like you write a text that says, dear so and so, and it was good hearing from you. I'm glad you feel better, that kind of stuff. So it looks like a regular letter. And then you put the secret writing on top of it. That takes a little bit of time. And then the rule was that you do surveillance detection for 3 hours. That means you walk around, you travel around in the city, and you're clever enough and skilled enough and trained well enough to determine whether you're being followed. And only when you know that you're not being followed, you put the letter in a mailbox. Because if you're being followed and you put a letter in your mailbox that is far away from your house,
Yeah.
people know that you're up to no good, and they fish that letter out, and next thing is they say hello. So that took up quite a bit of time. And at one point, when I was working really hard on my job as a programmer, and I did a lot of overtime because I loved what I'm doing. It wasn't paid overtime. I just loved the job so much. And I was really annoyed with that I was still a spy, and I had to spend time with the spy stuff.
So how did you go from being a courier to programming?
Well, I told you I took a college, went to college, and I got a bachelor's in business administration with a major in computer systems.
But
So that's where I learned how to code.
did you go from one to the other, just in like in a matter of like
What do you mean?
weeks?
Who's one and who's the other?
So did you go from one to the other? So from being a courier, and then while doing your
No,
education.
no, no. For the first year, I I went to college in the morning, and then I did bike messenger work in the afternoon.
Mm.
But after I had this accident, I got a payment because I was injured,
Oh.
and I got, I think it was $10,000. Again, that was quite a bit of money in
Mhm.
those days. So I didn't have to do that messenger job anymore. So I could study full time, and that allowed me to finish the 4-year program in 3 years.
Oh, so after that accident, you stopped delivering, and
Yeah,
then you're doing schooling, and then that led you to become a programmer.
that's right. And I was already very good at college. I loved doing that. And so when MetLife came to college and they did recruiting, and they liked me, and they recruited me, I didn't even have to apply. I
Wow.
showed them programs that I wrote already, and they were really impressed. And there was feedback. There were two managers that were interviewing me, and my manager eventually shared with me that the other guy told her, we got a live one here. Good programmers have always, really good programmers have always been in high demand, and smart people are in
Hmm.
high demand. And I was pretty smart. I lost a step or two, but I was sharp, and I was a really good programmer. So yeah, and I had a nice career as a programmer. Every year I got a raise until I got to a point where I was the tech lead for sort of an infrastructure type team that worked in a very, very large department of MetLife. And
Hmm.
from then on, I made it all the way into management and in the executive suite. Made a lot of money at
Wow.
one point. Not anymore.
So how how fast, or at this point, when you're working as a programmer, are you able to provide the KGB with valuable information, or how long did that take?
Where I have to disabuse you of the notion that I uh, provided a lot of super valuable information. And I hate that question because I have to give you an answer with an explanation. Um, Let me tell you, the one thing that I was able to provide them, which I didn't think was that valuable, but apparently it was,
Hmm.
periodic report how the average Americans the, reacted to world events. You're too young to have been aware, and most likely even alive, when the Soviet Union shot down a civilian South Korean airliner.
Hmm.
Something like that. What did Americans think about it? What's American public opinion? Because even though they had a lot of diplomats in New York and in Washington D.C., they couldn't they really couldn't get an honest opinion out of Americans. Maybe, but it was always, I was mingling with real Americans, right? So that was somewhat valuable. And at one point, they asked me to steal some technology that they couldn't get, that was not for sale to
Hmm.
communist countries. Hardware, software. I I copied some software. Doubt that this was very valuable. It was software that helps people even today manage companies in a capitalist system that that would probably not have been useful for a communist system, which is like highly hierarchical. So they never told me, and here comes the surprise. They never
Hmm.
told me what value my presence had for them. My presence in the United States had for them. And again, I'm referring back to the interviews. And there's one interview, the ex head of the Directorate S in the KGB, Directorate S was illegals.
Hmm.
And he said very clearly the value that these illegals in the U.S. had for us was insurance policy. Now I got to explain something else.
Hmm.
In those days, the most successful and most valuable agents for the KGB in the United States were Americans. Two Americans. They were moles, one in the CIA and the other one in the FBI. And they handed the KGB extremely valuable intelligence. Some of that actually resulted in the killing of Russians who cooperated with the CIA.
Wow.
Okay, their names were
Hmm.
Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen. Uh, they they're both still in jail. They eventually were caught, but it took a while.
Hmm.
So this is the end of the Cold War. There's an espionage war going on. And most spies, the CIA spies were in Moscow, were all diplomats under diplomatic cover. And most KGB, the CIA didn't have any illegals. Uh, Nobody cared to want to go and live in the Soviet Union voluntarily. The United States was a little more attractive.
Hmm.
And, and most of the, uh, all but the illegals of the KGB agents were diplomats. And so what happened during the end of the Cold War, when a diplomat was caught in espionage activities, they were kicked out of the country. And then let's say the CIA is kicking somebody out, the FBI is kicking somebody out, then the KGB just retaliates, and it went back and forth. Sometimes it was two or three people that were kicked out at the same time, and the head of the KGB was really worried that diplomatic relations would be broken up altogether, and then who was left in the country to collect the information that came out of Ames and Hansen, and that was us.
Hmm.
Okay, they never told me that. I was never prepared. What if? Nobody talked about it. Uh, there there are some rumors, and I don't know, I have no evidence that these rumors are correct, but that the Russians actually buried weapons and explosives all across the United States at one point,
Wow.
and the thought being that if if the Cold War gets hot, that us illegals were supposed to turn into saboteurs. I never got any kind of training in that respect. I never touched even a weapon. So they were very good at keeping secrets, even secrets to me,
Hmm.
who uh, who needed to have some background information to make decisions on his own and not ask the boss whether this is the right thing to do. And interestingly enough, they and I found out again. I read a lot of uh, biographies of ex KGB folks,
Hmm.
if they are available, or ex high level Soviet uh, government officials. And out of the KGB biographies, I found out that the KGB was this super, 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 super secret. They didn't trust anybody. Okay, so everybody just got enough information to barely function, including the diplomats. Now, the irony here is that they had to trust me because they couldn't check on me. If they check on me, then they're most likely being followed, and then I'm busted.
Yeah.
So they had to trust that I told them that I would tell them the truth and nothing but the truth. And I didn't tell them that I graduated first in class in a U.S. college. That would have been a, a no-no, because you don't want to stand out of a crowd, right? And I didn't tell them that I got married and I had a child in the United States. Okay, so but they had to trust me. So that was
Yeah.
the irony of all of this.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break and we're going to
Okay.
continue this interesting conversation. We're back, and we were just talking about how you were going to school, you became a valedictorian. I don't know if we did mention that, but you did mention that you graduated at the top of your class.
I did. All A's.
And you were living in the US as a KGB spy. And then you were chosen to speak at the Madison Square Garden
That's right. At the Feld Forum, the graduation speech, it was filled up. 4,000 people, I believe.
as you were working undercover.
Yeah, that was not a good idea for me to stand up in front of that many people. Being about 10 years older than the average graduate, speaking with a bit of an accent, and being tall. So I made myself very vulnerable. I got lucky. Nobody approached me. I wasn't even featured in the school newspaper.
Really?
Okay, I don't know. There was like, I got away with it because normally you would expect, some journalist trying figuring out, this guy, man, how did he do it? He's older. How did he manage? And would have made a very interesting interview for somebody.
Hmm.
Never happened. And
Wow.
some of the college teachers knew that I raced through the program in 3 years. In 3 years, and I aced the program. Uh, that should have triggered some questions. It didn't.
Hmm.
I got lucky. It was really dumb what I did.
I mean, working undercover and speaking at the Madison Square Garden, that's just, I mean, that's incredible. And so at this point, did you have a wife already?
No, I I got married when I was already a programmer and made good money.
And okay,
Uh,
so let's fast forward to when you were married and
yeah,
you had a child. So you were married here in the US, you were married in Germany, you had a kid here, you had a kid over there. You're Jack here, you're Albrecht in Germany.
yeah,
Completely different life split right down the middle. And then you're living this great life. So now we're fast forwarding until it came time and you were caught. So
yeah.
this
No,
is
well, I'm not. Hold it. It took a while to get caught. First, I resigned from the KGB, and I disappeared in the shadows. I wasn't caught until 9 years after my resignation.
So it was 9 years after, and
I resigned from the KGB.
okay, and okay, so this is the important part.
Yeah, yes,
In so you used to take the train to work, right?
right.
And you come across this big red splash of paint,
Now you're getting there. Yes.
and that was a message. It's time to come home.
Yeah, it was a message. It was the danger signal.
Hmm.
It says it wasn't just time to come home. It wasn't just a gentle invitation. It was a command. Get
Abort.
out of here, because this was the danger procedure. When if I saw that red dot, I was to just make a beeline to the Canadian border, get across, and ring the bell at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, and they would take me back to Moscow, because they were somehow convinced that I was about to be arrested, which turned out to be not true, but I couldn't have known. And they were very cautious. They were very protective of us illegals. So now that was a big surprise. And you want to ask more questions, or should I just continue with the story?
I mean, please continue.
Okay. So, and we already told the audience that I had a child, a good-looking young daughter, a pretty young daughter, 18 months old at the time. If you allow me to get up, I can show you a picture of what she looks like.
Yeah.
Um, okay, but it's right here. This is what she looked like when the red dot appeared.
Wow.
Cute as a button. And there's something that happened to me that I was not prepared for. Uh, I fell in love with a child. I wasn't in love with. I liked her mother, but I wasn't in love with her. And I was in love with my German wife, but the love for this child was stronger. It was unconditional, because when they're 18 months old, they can't talk yet. They can't say, "I love you, Daddy." They can't do anything for you. All they can do for you is be, and maybe smile at you. And so when I saw that, and I had tried to figure out, how can I support this little girl from a distance, because her mother was from South America. She had only 4 years of schooling, of formal schooling. So she couldn't earn enough money for them to live in comfort. I mean, they would have wound up in bad neighborhoods. And the thought of that, like, made my heart go, contract. It was
Mhm.
like a really, really bad idea. And I couldn't find with a solution, because I couldn't ask the KGB to help me out with that. Because at that point, I admit that I had a child there and a wife.
Mhm.
I don't know what they would have done with me, because I would have broken the rules in a big way. And as much as they may have liked me, that would not have been good for me. So there was no solution. So the day that I saw that dot, I had the presence of mind to ignore it, because they didn't know what I could have been sick, right? I, and there were some other reasons why I wouldn't have read this sign. So I went to work and I tried to figure things out, back and forth, back and forth. And if I go, I can get reunited with my German family. Uh, I will return as a conquering hero, because I knew I received this medal 2 years before. And
Mhm.
can you see it?
Mhm.
This is the Order of the Red Banner. It was the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union. This is the only time that they told me indirectly that I was doing a good job. Okay. So, and I would have, my German wife had a good life. She lived in a great apartment. She had the most expensive vehicle that you could buy,
Mhm.
and she didn't have to wait for it. There usually was a long wait for cars. and she even had a private telephone, which was extremely unusual. So I would have come back to a good life, to a wife that I loved, to a son, uh, and I would have still done some KGB work, not illegal, but I would still be traveling to the West and be a courier or something like that, and still have access to the good stuff that came out of the West. So it was all good. And the only thing that was good over here in the US was my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two things that uh, would be the consequences if I stay, I could be arrested because they might have been right about being investigated by the FBI. Or if I fail to give him the right message when I say I'm not coming, they could have interpreted this as a defection. And I knew for a fact that they didn't treat defectors very well, and that's putting it mildly. So when you put this all on the scale, you got all the good stuff back there, and a little good thing or a big good thing over here, but two really bad things over here. So you got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a moment when my subconscious made an irrational decision to stay. If you allow me to share that moment with you, because it's
Yeah.
arguably the most dramatic moment in my life. So I stalled for a while. This was on a Monday when I saw the sign. On Thursday, I got my regular shortwave radio transmission, and they explained to me, why I need to leave, because, the FBI is investigating you. And I still stalled because there was always a possibility that the radio didn't work or I was really sick, right? But kicking the can down the road. Eventually, at one point, I had to make a decision, and and one day there was something that could have interpreted an event that could have been interpreted as a threat. When they tried to figure out what's the matter with him, they had to figure out, am I still alive? Am I still functional? So they sent one of the New York-based agents to look for me at the place where I take the A train into Manhattan out of Queens. They knew I had to tell them that. So one day it was still cold, and a cold December morning. It was still dark, and I'm waiting for the train, and some guy in a dark trench coat comes slowly up to me and whispers into my ear, not directly, but very close, "You gotta come home or else you're dead." Now, that was spoken in a very strong Russian accent, and you had to take it seriously,
Yeah.
but I firmly believed, I rationalized that he didn't have a good command of the English language, and he wanted to say like busted or something like that, but he didn't have the vocabulary. It was not a good message unless it was a threat. So now I really it got to a point where I knew that they knew that I knew, and I couldn't stall anymore. They saw me. They know that if I'm not acting now, there's something wrong with me. So in the next radiogram, they called me to a dead drop operation where I would receive passport and money in an oil can, as I explained to you how that works. So I went and to that spot. It was a spot in a park on Staten Island, in a park. It was a hollowed tree, a tree that was hollow at the bottom. Can't miss the spot. I found it. I described it. There was no way to miss it. There was even a street sign at the entrance to the park. And also, there was a signal system. The fellow who communicated to me that the oil can is in that spot. I saw the chalk mark. Says, okay, it's there. I'm going there, and there's no oil can. There's no oil can.
Yeah.
And it was in the dark. So I had a flashlight, and I was going around with the flashlight. There was nobody else in the park. It was wintertime. Nothing. And I go a little more in circles until about 15 minutes later, I said, I gave up. There's nothing here. And as I walk out of the park, and this is where I give my subconscious credit for making a super risky decision that was like crazy based on intellectual analysis,
Mm-hmm.
logical analysis. It fed me three words: I am staying. That was it. I am staying. Now, I always wanted to have a neurologist sort of poke around in my brain and analyze what makes my subconscious like ruling me in many ways. I make we all make a lot of decisions that we're not aware of because
Yeah.
they have to be done very quickly. If you're in traffic and there's somebody braking in front of you, you don't even think, should I brake too? Right? But
Mm-hmm.
this was a life-changing decision. And I've made a couple more like that as an American. When I made the decision that to interview with 60 Minutes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that was dangerous to my career, and uh, it turned out to be right. I was let go from my last job, but I said, "Oh well, I'm just going to be making money when doing public speaking and stuff like that." I had no evidence that I could do this. So this is my I have always been under the guidance of my subconscious brain, whether I knew it or not. So and it made that decision, and from that point on, I took some measures to first find out whether the FBI is still investigating me, and I had enough skills to come up with a negative. That means I
Mm-hmm.
was in the clear as far as the FBI was concerned, and I was right. And then I made sure, and this is sort of the end of this part of the story. I made sure that I was not reliably at the same spot at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
to make it very difficult to lie in wait for me and do me harm. So I would go to work. I had flex time at a different time. I'd take different routes to different subway
Mm-hmm.
stations, and I was unpredictable. And when I did this for about 3 months, I told my wife, who always bothered me. She said, "Can we have a house?" I said, "Okay, I have made a decision. We're going to get a house. A year from now, we're moving into the suburbs." That was the beginning of my American dream. And I knew at that time that I would never, ever see Germany again because I was
Wow.
not going to say hello to the FBI, which turned out to be wrong.
Because you were eventually caught.
Yeah.
And it was all due to an argument that you had with your wife, where
No, you're
you're
getting the sequence a little bit wrong.
mm,
The 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 fact that that my existence became known to the FBI was because of a betrayal. There was an agent. It was a Russian Soviet citizen who was working in the archives of the KGB, and he was feeding British intelligence information out of that archive. And amongst that information was that Jack Barsky is an illegal who lives in the northeast of the United States. And that is when the FBI got noticed. They went through electronic files and particularly Social Security register, and they found somebody who, at the age of like 31 or so, I believe,
mhm,
applied for a Social Security card, and they knew that's the guy. And then they spent 2 years watching me because they knew one thing. They knew that I was a highly trained agent because I had survived that many years in that kind of a role, and they
mhm,
wanted to make sure that I'm not active anymore. If I was active, if I was active, they wanted to stay far away because they knew I could find out that I'm being investigated and I could flee. They had that much respect for the KGB, and so they investigated me. And as part of the investigation, they put a listening device in my kitchen. That's when me and the family were on a visit to Canada. We were
mhm,
gone for about a week. So they searched the house, and put a listening device in the kitchen. And that is when I made a confession. So we had an argument with a wife who just never really trusted me, and she thought I had affairs with other women, which I didn't have, and I got so sick and tired of it. And I said, "Hey, listen, I have absolute proof to you that I am on your team. We I want nothing but good things for you. I risk my life or risk going to jail by making a decision to stay with you and Chelsea, our daughter." Well, guess what? That didn't help. But the FBI had the confession on tape.
Hmm.
So that's when they came and said hello to me.
Yeah. Because I mean, you told your wife like she has no idea what you gave up to be with her.
No. And that, as I said, it didn't help because now all of a sudden she's married to an ex-Russian agent. They can't be trusted at all. So I shouldn't have shared that with her.
Yeah.
I just was so desperate to fix that relationship because it was tough to live with an individual who you liked who doesn't trust you.
Hmm.
Okay, so anyway, that's in hindsight, but
Yeah.
that's everything turned out to my advantage because if the and to a lot of other people's advantages. Uh, because if the FBI doesn't hook up with me, I'm not talking to you today.
Hmm.
I don't have a second marriage that was wonderful for as long as it lasted. I don't have another girl as a daughter who I love just as much, and I don't have an incredibly interesting life now. If I don't get out in the public realm and then I don't get to know all these interesting people that I know now. So it all turned out it wasn't predictable because when they said hello, and initially I thought I'd probably wind up in jail. There was a good chance
Hmm.
because there were some people in hindsight, I was told there were some people higher ups in the FBI who wanted to put me in jail to send a message.
And you became a U.S. citizen, and
Yes, sir.
you never went to jail for
Not
any
for a
of
minute.
this.
Not for a minute.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, I cooperated. I was carried as a trusted source by the FBI for a while. They got enough out of me to justify not putting me in jail because if I'm in jail, I'm not cooperating.
Hmm.
And the lead agent on my case, who is now a very very good friend, which is another oddity in this story, he was got a recommendation by the director of the FBI for having done such a good job, and that was after the FBI director found out, the information that I was able to share.
Wow, Jack Barsky, your story is just so fascinating, and I'm sure we could have gone hours on just like getting into your story and how everything evolved and then devolved and then how it evolved again. But thank you so much for coming on and for having this conversation with me.
So, if people are interested in getting to hear more of the story, if they Google my name or they go to YouTube to put my name in, there's a lot of interviews. There's a lot of other people who have taken different angles on podcasts
Mhm.
than you have. You managed to ask a couple of questions that were never asked, which is always good for me.
Mhm.
And your approach was refreshingly common sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was a change in the interviews that I've had recently, and then there's also my book that they can find. Once they Google me, they find my book, and they also find an audio documentary which is called The Agent, which is a 13 episode audio drama. It's narrated and it has music and it was really really well done and it has interviews with me and also other people that played an important role in my life, such as the agent that I just mentioned. He was being interviewed. So there's plenty of material out there. I can't sit with anybody, and that included Lex Friedman, for a second time. I'm sorry. I'm not discriminating against you, but you had your shot. You did a good job. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and giving me the time.
Okay, you're most welcome.